Welcome back to my home sweet grown garden. Today I want to cover starting seeds, the process for how I start my seeds, and I will be starting some seeds out today with you. I'm about 4 weeks away from my last frost date. So what that means is I have about 4 weeks where I need to protect these seeds and keep them growing indoors because they will not survive overnight in below frosty or frozen temperature. So I'm going to cover some misconceptions about seeds and how to start seeds and my tips for really strong success in seed starting. Tip 1, when you are buying seeds, you will always see on your packets a sell by date. So on this packet, it's in ink at the top, you can see, and it says packed for 2025, sell by 12/31/25. On this one, it's the bottom, there's lot numbers, and it says packed for 2023, sell by 12/31/23. What the date on your seed packets means is the folks that sell these seeds need to sell seeds within a calendar year. So seeds that they save in 2023 cannot be sold in 2024 or 2025. This enables people who are buying seeds to have the latest and greatest seeds most recently taken off the plant, which means higher germination rates for you, the buyer of the seed packet. Now, lots of seeds will last more than a year, really more than 3 or 4 years, and have good germination rates. It really depends on the seed that you're saving. So things like carrots and onions have very low germination rates, really past a year. But things like herbs, flowers, these will last a lot longer. So I do not throw out any seed packets, even if it says packed for 2023. I keep all my seeds. And if I get a year or 2 or 3 even or more, I'm going to keep all my seed packets. I'll never throw these out. I still think that there's a chance for them to grow, and sometimes I'll just sow a couple more seeds per cell or container the further the year is. So if this was packed for 2023, I might throw 1 or 2 extra seeds in each container. But really, for the most part, most seeds that you start, you won't see a germination issue unless you're really getting a number of years out from the sell by date or they're stored incorrectly. But overall, my advice is do not throw out seed packets. Try to germinate them if you're looking to grow that seed before you throw them out and go out and buy a new one. That's just a waste. Tip 2 is get good seed starting soil. The soil is the key component to healthy plants. So they sell bags of seed starting mix, and a lot of the time that is heavy in peat moss, in things that don't actually hold nutrition for your plants. And in my opinion, you have to up pot them because once they get to a certain size, they're gonna need more nutrition than that seed starting mix is able to provide. So for me, what I do is I will buy a potting mix, which has nutrition in it, and it will say feeds up to 3 months, feeds up to, whatever. Good quality seed starting soil, in my opinion, that's where you want to put your money for soil. In beds and giant places, I still think soil is very, very important. The health of your soil is paramount to the success of your seeds. However, seed starting, when they are fragile little itty bitty baby plants that really need the best chances of survival and the best conditions, this is where you should spend your money. Next tip is container size. So there are a lot of different types of containers that you can buy or repurpose in your house. I'll go over some of those in a second, but size of container does matter. So if you are keeping a plant in your house starting and you have 4 weeks until your last frost date, which means 4 weeks until you can really plant it out into your garden, smaller containers will work just fine. You have to pick a container based on how much time they'll be living in this so that they don't get root bound, which means the roots will have no place to expand to and will just start wrapping around the container looking for new space but not finding it. So it'll just kind of become a knot. Roots need to spread out and have spaces to spread out. So you can when you have about 3 to 4 weeks, something like this is a 3-inch pot, work just fine for most plants. If you are starting something that grows really, really quick, so tomatoes tend to grow really quickly, or you're growing something indoors for more than a month, or for me, I've started some of my plants inside in January, bigger pots are absolutely necessary. You can start in smaller plants and up pot, but for me, I'd rather reduce the amount of work that I have to do later on. I'll just start plants in big pots and let them take over that entire pot. So just knowing the rate of growth for a plant and how long you're going to keep them in those tiny pots, you can kind of guesstimate for the right size of pot that you will need. Last tip is fertilizing your seeds, or your started plants rather. When you have a seed, it has enough energy to pop a seedling out of its seed pod and pop out of the soil. That's about as much of energy as a seed itself holds. So a grow light gives it the ability to photosynthesize and create more energy to continue growing. Your soil will have nutrition for the seed and the roots to feed itself and continue growing. And if you're keeping a seed indoors for longer than, I would say, 6 to 7 weeks, you're gonna wanna research some fertilizer to feed your plants. And a liquid fertilizer is my preferred way to feed my soil and feed my plants. And I will just put a tablespoon or so and really dilute it in water and just work it into my watering schedule. Okay, let's dive into it. So what you will need to start seeds is seed packets, labels. So I have little plastic tags, containers, and containers can be something square like this. These fit into trays really well, so I like these. Other options are recycled materials. So something like this, which is a container that held blueberries. There's ones that hold strawberries. These are nice because they have holes in the bottom of them, which lets water out. So water's not just sitting in the bottom of these containers that are made for seed starts also have that. So that's a key component to creating or choosing your container. These are nice for things like lettuce, things that can kind of be grouped together and sown in one space and broken apart when they're pretty young seedlings. I wouldn't recommend this for all plants, but I have a couple that I like to do. Another option are seed cells. So a seed cell is one container that's broken up into compartments. So this is a 4 cell, this is a 6 cell, and this one is smaller than the 4. This is good for small plants that you are planning to up pot. So you could put 4 plants or 6 seeds into this cell container, 1 in each. When they germinate, after 3 weeks, depending if you start to see roots pop out of the bottom, you can up pot to something like this, that 3-inch container. And they can grow a little bit more with more space in that container. And then something like this, which is pretty large, you really wouldn't have to up pot, especially if you're working with 4 to 5 weeks before you're planting out anyways. And these are nice because there's big openings at the bottom where you can stick your finger or I've used a Sharpie before, stick it in and push the plant and the soil out, and it comes out in one block, which is really nice. And then another option, which I don't lean towards, and I'll go over the pros and cons, is something like recycled material, like toilet paper rolls. Now this is nice because in a container, you'll need to put them in a container where water can pool at the bottom without just creating kind of a mess. It's nice because they're cells, so you can put 1 plant or 1 seed in each of these containers, soil in, and then the seed on top. But this will tend to get pretty soggy. It will also not necessarily let your root systems breathe as well or kind of take in water at a reasonable route. Like you can't really, I guess, take care of these in a controlled way that maybe a plastic container will. When you put water into here, you'll know how much water stays in here. When it's paper, the water is kind of just seeping everywhere. It's a little bit hard to tell if the water is going all the way through because you can't really it's a little bit difficult to take this out when it's filled with soil and seeds. You don't want to disturb them too much. So that's not my preference. It's certainly an option if that's what you have available. Use what you have. And then I'm sure there's other options of recycled and, available materials in your home. But those are kind of the ones that I've used in the past. My go-to was always the cells, the 4 and 6 cells, and then containers though. And then lastly, a tray is absolutely necessary. This tray will not have holes in the bottom. This is just a solid plastic tray. This is helpful for both carrying your plants. So if you are hardening them off, which means taking them from an indoor situation to outdoors to get sunlight, to acclimate to your weather, to acclimate to getting wind pushing up against the stem, it's a really good idea to do that to your plants a couple weeks. I usually start about 2 weeks before I plant out into the garden. I'll take them outside during the day and then bring them back inside at night. That process strengthens your plants and reduces the shock, because when you bring them into a very still, very controlled environment indoors and then bring them outdoors to your garden, the conditions are completely different. So that just reduces that shock and will minimize or reduce or eliminate the shock or stunting of a plant. And a stunted plant just doesn't grow at the speed and rate that it should because of the conditions changing really quickly for that plant. Okay, let's start with a strawberry container. So what I will do is take the seed starting mix, my soil, and fill it up. Now I will not fill this all the way to the brim. And the reason for that is I want my plants, when they pop out of the soil, to have room underneath the cover where they won't bonk straight into the plastic. This cover acts as sort of like a humidity dome. It keeps some of the humidity and water in without, immediately evaporating off the surface, which is nice. But you really only want that humidity dome while the seeds are germinating. Once the leaves pop out of the soil, it's not completely necessary to have a humidity dome. In fact, it kind of promotes mold or algae to grow on the surface, so it's actually not that beneficial to have a humidity dome after your seeds germinate. So I'm going to take this is a Paris Island lettuce, my favorite type of lettuce. I'm going to just sprinkle some seeds on top. Now your seed packets have tons of information for how to sow this. Some will say to surface sow, which just means sprinkle your seeds on the very top of your soil without covering them. For these, I'm gonna sprinkle some on top and lightly cover them with some soil. So I'm gonna sprinkle these on a little haphazardly, but as evenly across the surface as I can. Beautiful, like that. And then lightly cover them with soil. Now, a general rule for covering seeds is you bury them or cover them about the equivalent or double the width of the seed. And that just enables your seed to pop out of the soil and not get buried too much. Because if your seedling can't reach the surface and the leaves cannot pop out of the soil, then they won't get sunlight and cannot germinate. And then the last step after covering them is just watering them. This is just regular water, no fertilizer, nothing in it. And I'm going to water it right over my soil. So if there's any excess water, it will go into the soil. And then the last step, don't ever forget to not label your plants. Now I know what it is. Always, always label your seedlings. I'm lightly pressing in the soil, not too firm, not too tough. Just so it's an even layer, and the reason for that is I want the seeds to go in all at the same layer. When it's too fluffy, your seeds will kind of get lost in some of the kind of crevices and holes in there. And also the water, when you water it on top, the soil will move more and will actually distribute your seeds a little bit unevenly, not where you actually place them, because the water will displace your seeds. All right, I like to dump seeds into my hand. It gives me a little bit more control rather than just sprinkling them over the soil. And handling your seeds is completely fine. It's ideal to wash your hands before you handle seeds, just so there's no contamination. If you're cleaning your kitchen before you're starting seeds, you touch bleach, you touch anything else that maybe you just shouldn't be in your food or be in the soil or could affect your seeds in any way, you know, it's always a good idea to wash your hands. You should be doing that anyways. But handling your seeds like that is completely fine. Won't affect your seeds whatsoever. And then again, a really light top of soil. I'm just breaking up the soil as much as I can with my fingers. Okay, they are covered, and then water on top. It's about 30 seeds of the lettuce, 30 seeds of the bok choy, all just in one container. It's really nice. Easy process to starting a lot of seeds all in one container. Then later you only have to water this. You can separate your seeds if you want to into separate containers, or you can just let them grow. In there and lightly separate them and plant them directly in your garden, depending on, again, how long they're staying inside, how big they've gotten, and how tangled the roots are together as they grow in there. Now, just to show you a variety of different shapes of containers and what I would typically put in them, I'm gonna do this is a 4-inch container. And what we're gonna put in this one is a tropical sunset tomato. All right, tropical sunset tomato label goes right in there, like that. Now I'm only gonna put one of these in here, one seed. So I will tap one out. If I don't see that this germinates in a couple days, I will stick one more seed in there. It's total preference on how many seeds you wanna start. But because I know I only want one of these tomatoes, I'll only do one seed. That way I don't have to, if 3 of them germinate, I put 3 seeds in and 3 germinate. I won't have to either find a new home for them or separate them out or do any extra work. Another option for containers is a round one. Now, round ones won't sit as flush in a tray as square ones. Square ones will fit very uniform next to each other. Round ones I don't tend to use because, you know, there's lots of empty space in a tray. However, just for the sake of showing you, I'm going to fill this one up and put a ground cherry in. Ground cherries are very similar to tomatoes. I'll show you the picture on the seed packet. They are essentially like a tomato that grows in a husk, and they're called ground cherries because when they're ripe, they fall to the ground. And they're kind of berry-like almost. It's like a mix between a berry and a tomato. I made a jam out of this last year and it was wildly good. These seeds are really, really small. Teeny, teeny, tiny. They're right there. I'm going to put 2 in this one because I'm a little worried with such tiny seeds that one might get displaced and get too low in the soil. So 2, again, increases my chances of getting at least 1 to germinate. Barely covered and watered in. And by barely covered, I mean I sprinkled soil on top, but not a thick amount. Water that in, and done. Another one good to go. Okay, I'll give you an example of one where I do sprinkle a lot of seeds into one container. So this is a 3-inch container. And I'm gonna pack a little bit of soil in. Like so, just leaving just a little bit of space at the top. Herbs are something I do tend to put a lot of seeds in one container, but one that I like to grow in bunches that I will not end up separating is chives. So chives do well in a bunch. So I will put about 10 seeds of these into one cell like this, and I'll sprinkle them evenly kind of throughout the 3-inch space to give them a little bit of space, but I do not plan on separating these to put one chive into each of its own container, if that makes sense. So I will plant this into my garden exactly like this. I'll take the whole 3-inch set of plants and I will plant them all together. Beautiful. Water it in. And we've got chives started. Okay. In a 6-cell tray like this, plants that I typically will start in these are flowers. I like it because you can, when one cell germinates, that's how you'll know the rest of them should be on their way to germinating as well. So you can quickly identify, oh, after 4 of them have germinated, 5 and 6 have not, so those seeds were probably duds, so you can re-sow those ones. It's kind of a nice way to gauge when they should all be up, because they're all the same type of flower. Or if you're doing 3 of one kind and 3 of another, it's the same thing. You kind of group them and understand when they start to go up together through the soil. So I will fill these up, pushing the soil down to the bottom so there's no air pockets. And this soil will not really fall through these cracks. There are cracks in the sides and a hole in the bottom. The soil really doesn't go through, which is what you want. Stays in here. And I'll fill them up pretty evenly in each square. Now, flower seeds tend to be smaller than other types of seeds. They tend to be about the size of herb seeds, a lot of basils, things like that, meaning pretty small. So when you fill up these seeds cells, you want it to be pretty high because the seeds are so small. You don't want your seed to germinate all the way down here. You want them to be pretty close to the top. So that's what I'm at. It's maybe 1/4 of an inch space. And the way that I typically will do these, again, depends on what I'm growing, depends on how many of something that I want, but I will do one marker in the back, and the one that corresponds is the one in front. So I will do these are snapdragons, Bazaar Mix. This is the Snapdragon Bronze Dragon, just BD. And then this last one will be a Holy Basil. So these 2 are Snapdragons. They should germinate about the same time, same rate, and then Holy Basil will have a different germination schedule, but I'll still be able to keep an eye on all of them in the same container. Okay, now that they are all labeled, BM means Bazaar Mix. That is what that looks like. And these seeds are teeny tiny. That's 2 seeds, if you can see them. So tiny. So I'm gonna do 2 seeds per cell. Again, if one gets displaced or does not germinate, I'll be able to tell that. I'll place them, the 2 tiny seeds right in the center and right in the center. Next is the BD Bronze Dragon. And again, same thing, teeny tiny seeds. I'm gonna put 2 in each cell, so 4 total. Ah, these came in a baggie. Love that. And again, these tiny seeds you can handle with your hands, no problem. It won't affect the seeds. You won't squeeze them too hard, anything like that. They have a shell protecting layer. You won't affect the seed at all. Okay, back in its baggie. And then back in its seed packet. And lastly, holy basil, which is a really nice type of herb for teas. And it smells lovely and gets very large, which I like. Okay, now this was packed for 2023, so this is one of my sort of older packets. I have older seeds, but because of that, I'm gonna put 2 seeds in each, even though I really only need 2 plants maximum. But increases my germination rate. Make sure at least one of them will germinate. Now these are all really tiny seeds, so again, minimal coverage of soil on top. Like a tiny pinch for each cell is really all you need. If anything, you could surface sow these, certainly, but this soil is so well sifted that I think just a tiny bit of soil on top will do well. All right, water on top. Now for tiny seeds, using a hose with a really intense water pressure really isn't the best thing, because those tiny seeds can, if it's blasted with water, shoot out of these cells. So you just want to be careful. I use, it's a tiny spout, and it really controls the water and doesn't really affect the seed or the soil that it's growing in. Okay, my least favorite method, but I will show you for the sake of completion, is the toilet paper roll cell method. So this is going to be very similar to everything else I've done. I'm going to fill each of these up with soil and pack it in a little. I have extra 4-inch containers. Obviously you can use just a container from inside your home, like a regular plastic one that I showed you earlier. Any container that holds these together and upright is really all that you're looking for. And it's a little tricky to get the soil only in the tubes. The soil's kind of going everywhere. And I guess a plus for this method, a benefit, is when the cardboard on the outside dries out, you will know that your soil inside each cell has dried out. So it does kind of give you an indication of when you need to water that a plastic wouldn't. So that is kind of nice, especially if you're inclined to overwater, especially new seedlings. I know I'm one of those people. I have killed plants by overwatering in the past. Labels are done. And I'm gonna label these before I put the seeds in, so I don't wanna forget which one I put in, or the container turns a direction and I wasn't expecting it to and lose track. So that's what these look like. Same method, same process as before. One seed goes in each container, right at the top. And then holy basil, I'm gonna put 2 seeds in this one. 1, 2. And 1, 2. Right on top. Same process as all the rest. Tiny bit of soil right on top. Press it down ever so lightly, and then I'm gonna water a little bit in each, at the very top of each tube. Now, I would not need to water necessarily so all the cardboard is saturated. It doesn't really do much in terms of germination to have the whole thing completely saturated the entire time. All that you need wet is the top layer of the soil itself. Now, when the seeds pop up through the soil in this kind of container, you might want to do a slightly heavier water, or bottom water this. The water comes from the bottom, encouraging your plants to grow downwards, which is really the whole point of having a tube. You got a lot of vertical space in those cells. Okay, what do you think? That's a lot of methods of starting seeds, or at least a lot of containers, very similar method. All of these are fantastic. All of these will start plants. So let me know how you're starting your seeds this year and what you're using to start and hold your seeds and seedlings. I will check in with you once these have germinated and show you what they look like down the road. If you have any questions or any recommendations of other things to try and start seeds in, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for joining me today. See you next time. Bye.